I want to revisit the June trip, but first there's something that I noticed when I was watching Charlie's trial. Charlie Adelson's extortion payment plan defense theory can tell us more about what's really going on with the Adelsons. Dan Roshbaum specializes in federal white-collar conspiracy cases. He specializes in justifying financial anomalies. He only focused on the money aspect of Charlie's case. So what does that mean for Wendi, Donna, and Harvey? They're in the same boat. If you look at a group of people who are part of a conspiracy, their choice of attorneys can tell you what they're most concerned about. I don't know if Harvey has his own attorney, but Wendi has John Lauro, Donna has used Maricel Descalzo, and Dan Roshbaum, and Charlie has, of course, used Dan Roshbaum. If you go to each of their websites and look at the types of cases they've been most successful on, and average them out amongst the three of them, these are the types of charges their clientele were really expecting. A federal criminal conspiracy charge likely involving high-stakes white-collar crimes such as fraud, insider trading, bribery, money laundering, and/or healthcare-related offenses. Why would each of them hire attorneys that specialize in federal white-collar conspiracy cases when this is a state violent felony conspiracy case? Let's revisit the June trip. There are some details that Special Agent Chris Corbett mentioned in Charlie's trial. There are also some key things that Luis talked about in his proffer. With the information from both Chris Corbett and Luis Rivera, there are some additional things we can learn as far as what could have been happening leading up to and during that trip.
All right, do we have any other evidence that law enforcement was able to find to show who rented the car on June 2nd besides the last rental contract we saw?
Yes, I believe you mentioned earlier a traffic citation. We did recover a traffic citation that was issued to Mr. Garcia, and in that we can see that he is driving the rental vehicle, the same information from the rental contract.
Okay, and was this citation from 9:48 p.m. on June 2nd?
It is, yes.
So within an hour of renting this car, he got a traffic ticket?
He did.
All right, and that was in that silver Nissan Altima?
Yes.
Jeffrey Lacoste drives a silver Nissan vehicle, or drove that at the time of this murder.
I am familiar with that, yes.
Sigfredo managed to get a speeding ticket within 1 hour of renting the silver Nissan. With that car being very similar to Jeff Lacasse's car, if Sigfredo intentionally rented that car to match Jeff's car, how would he know what kind of car Jeff Lacasse drove if Katie wasn't the one to tell him? Sigfredo only could have learned that from Wendi. Sigfredo was pulled over at 9:48 p.m. That's got to say something about how he switched cars the next day on June 3rd. As far as my theory in part 6 of this series as to what was happening based on the call records for June 2nd, it's the same. The only thing that I want to add is that I think Sigfredo didn't tell anyone about being pulled over. Sigfredo also led Katie to believe that he was still en route to Tallahassee, but really he was still in Miami and just wanted to stay at another woman's house. Sigfredo and Katie didn't have a real conversation until about 11:05, about an hour and 15 minutes after he got pulled over. Katie would think he's just driving. She probably thought that because at 10:41 p.m., she called Charlie and they spoke for 23 minutes and 12 seconds. She probably wouldn't be speaking to Charlie for any length of time if Sigfredo can just pop up on her. This particular weekend in June, Sigfredo has made some serious violations in terms of what you'd probably call criminal etiquette. The first one was after he got pulled over. One must make the people in his or her circle aware of any recent contact with law enforcement. This doesn't apply to everyone all the time. People get pulled over. It happens. But depending on what you're doing and who you're doing it with, you should let the people you run with know what's going on. Because if it's a pattern, it could be a sign of a much bigger problem. In this situation, Sigfredo is not obligated to tell Katie, but he was obligated to tell Luis that he got pulled over. If Sigfredo was aware his license was suspended before he got pulled over, he was obligated to tell Luis before they even rented the first car. The biggest problem is that the police let Sigfredo go with the suspended license. That is a huge red flag, and you'll see why that is shortly.
All right, and that was in that silver Nissan Altima?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the statement that Jeffrey Lacoste drives a silver Nissan vehicle, or drove that at the time of this murder.
I am familiar with that, yes.
Now, did this traffic ticket create a record that law enforcement would be in possession of? And that record memorialized the fact that Sigfredo Garcia is driving this silver Nissan rental car from Comfort on that day.
Yes.
All right, so after he got that traffic ticket that memorializes that law enforcement is going to have, what did he do next?
There was a change of vehicles. So we have an additional contract from Comfort Rental Car that indicates the vehicle was changed out for a blue Hyundai.
Okay, so then he goes back to Comfort, rents a different car.
That's correct.
All right.
Another violation. Remember, Sigfredo was pulled over with a suspended license and let go. Being that he switched vehicles, he was aware that there was a higher risk in driving the same vehicle. But the risk is still higher because it's still Sigfredo driving on a suspended license. Sigfredo was trying to avoid just getting pulled over again. He's not just risking himself being arrested, but also Luis, because the police will likely search his car, which has guns and possibly drugs in it. Felons can't possess firearms, and both Sigfredo and Luis are felons. Let's go back to Luis's proffer.
Was he ever going to drive the Prius?
No, I drove. He drove for a little bit. The night we left, he drove. He took off. But then he was drunk. He's like, you know what, man, you should drive, because if we get pulled over, this car's not under my name, it's under your names. Because if we get pulled over, this car's not under my name, it's under your names. So I'm like, you know what, you're right. But then I tell him, I'm in probation, man. If we get pulled over, I'm going to go to jail.
Another violation for Sigfredo. Garcia was trying to mitigate risk for himself by lying to Rivera on why he should drive. But what he should have done is what Rivera did, give Garcia the courtesy of knowing the additional risk of having him drive instead. This was the last point that Garcia could have come clean about the previous events, allowing Rivera to decide whether or not he wants to participate further in Garcia's plan. Now Luis is going to talk about the drive to Tallahassee on the July trip when he was pulled over.
You're saying that to him?
To him, and we get pulled over.
Okay.
So the day we get pulled over, the officer grabbed my license, came back, gave me a ticket, like, slow down, put your seatbelt, gave me a speeding ticket. And I'm on my left, that's it. And I'm on my left, that's it.
Luis says, so the day we get pulled over, the officer grabbed my license, came back, gave me a ticket, was like, slow down, put on your seatbelt. He gave me a speeding ticket. Then the next sentence in the transcript says, and that was it. But that's not what Luis said. Luis said, él no me molesta, which in Spanish means he didn't bother me, which is very important because not only did the police officer let them go, he didn't give them any issues in the process.
I looked at Garcia and told him, this motherfucker didn't take me to jail.
Luis knows if they're asking questions to figure out where and when he got pulled over, it's because there's no record of him getting pulled over, and they want to find out where and when it happened.
So you got a ticket in the Prius?
In the Prius.
On the second trip?
On the second trip.
On the way up here?
On the way up here.
You have any idea what town you were near or what road you were on? Or?
Man, I know, keep going with these towns, you know, I don't know, I'm not good with these towns.
I know.
The only thing I can probably just say, I keep saying Gainesville, because that's like, every time I pack, I'm like, yo, are we close? Every time I used to see, because it had a G on it, I'm saying, yo, are we close? He's like, yeah, we like back in like an hour away from Tallahassee. Something like that. I'm like, all right, but by that time, that's when I got pulled over.
But you weren't in Miami. You weren't in Tallahassee. So were you on the interstate, you think?
Yeah, I was in Gainesville. I asked him, because when we got pulled over, I'm like, yo, how long from here, where we get pulled over to Tallahassee? He's like, we got maybe like an hour or 2 hours, the most. The top was 2 hours. So I'm like, all right. But I'm not trying to get pulled over. I know if I get pulled over again, we fuck. But when we get pulled over, I tell him, yo, this is a sign, man. We should just turn around. He's like, nah, man, fuck that. We up here.
Luis goes on to say that after he got pulled over and let go, he told Sigfredo, this is a sign, we should turn around. A sign of what? What would that be a sign of? Luis doesn't say, but neither does anyone else in the room ask him, because they already know. I'm no body language expert, but if I show you how Sanford was looking for the 50 seconds Luis was talking about when he got pulled over versus the immediate 50 seconds after, and I put them side by side, you can easily see what Sanford is reacting to. Federal and state authorities share information. Sometimes the state authorities will be directed by the feds to not arrest people who they're investigating. They don't want the local authorities to interfere and possibly compromise their investigation. Garcia and Rivera both were pulled over by police for speeding, both had suspended licenses, and both were let go without any issues. Being let go easily was a sign to Rivera that there could be a no interference order on law enforcement by the feds. The FBI began collecting evidence on the almighty Latin King and Queen Nation around January of 2014. Now back to the June trip and Chris Corbett.
So after he got that traffic ticket that memorializes that law enforcement is going to have, what did he do next?
There was a change of vehicles. So we have an additional contract from Comfort Rental Car that indicates the vehicle was changed out for a blue Hyundai.
Okay, so then he goes back to Comfort, rents a different car.
That's correct.
All right, this time a blue Hyundai. And again, was it Garcia renting it and not Rivera?
That's correct.
All right. What can you tell us about the travel of Luis Rivera's handset on June 4th of 2014?
You see how they skipped over everything from June 3rd? The only thing they talked about was how Sigfredo changed rental cars. No call reports or locations for June 3rd. Now, just because the state doesn't bring it up in trial doesn't mean they're not in possession of the evidence. It could mean that the call reports and location data for June 3rd aren't so damaging to Charlie's case. It could also mean that the call records and location data for June 3rd is potentially damaging for someone they haven't arrested yet.
So again, Mr. Rivera is the only one that we have location information on for this period. And again, just looking at the cell sites that his handset is communicating with, we can see that it's consistent with leaving the South Florida, Miami area. We see down here at the bottom right, early morning hours of June 4th of 2014. And then we can see that it is consistent with getting into Tallahassee the early morning or later morning of June 4th.
All right, did you look at the records to see what the communication, if any, was between the different parties during this June trip to Tallahassee?
Yes, we did.
Okay, can you tell us about that?
And again, just merely bracketing the period of time that the trip to Tallahassee was occurring, we can look at the communications. This is a summary of just the subjects in our investigation and other targets. So we've eliminated all the other people they're talking to and just focused on the phone calls where they're talking to other subjects in the investigation. But we can see that there are a number of events from the 2nd through the 5th.
Okay.
Remember, the flow of information should be from Wendi to Charlie, Charlie to Katie, then Katie to Sigfredo, or the other way around, Sigfredo to Katie, Katie to Charlie, then Charlie to Wendi. But that's not what we see. The only two people talking in this early morning of June 4th is Katie and Charlie. Wendi and Sigfredo are both sources of information, and they're the only ones who actually need the information the other provides. But as you can see at the top of your screen, the only ones you see doing the talking are the intermediaries, Katie and Charlie. Just after midnight at 12:21, Katie calls Charlie and has a 40-minute, 58-second phone call. That's not a quick call to convey information. That's two people who don't know what's going on and speculating as to what could be going on. A couple minutes later, Charlie calls Katie. It's a 10-second call that looks like Katie didn't pick up, but Katie calls Charlie right back for a 36-minute, 33-second call in which they're probably talking about why they don't know what's going on. Being that Sigfredo and Luis left Miami for Tallahassee around midnight to 1 a.m. on June 4th, that decision had to be made during the day on June 3rd. Since Katie is probably under the impression that Sigfredo and Luis left for Tallahassee the night of June 2nd, She isn't privy to the planning of their actual time of their departure and arrival. The best time for Sigfredo and Luis to arrive in Tallahassee can't be decided by just Sigfredo and Luis. It's based on Wendy's schedule and what Wendi knows about Dan Markel's schedule. If Katie and Charlie are out of the loop, then the only way Sigfredo would know when to arrive in Tallahassee would be directly from Wendi. If Sigfredo already spoke with Wendi to coordinate their arrival directly via burner phones, then upon their arrival, Sigfredo and Wendi should meet in person to figure everything out. They would meet between 9 and 10 a.m. on June 4th in Tallahassee. And these are the things that need to be figured out. Dan Markel's schedule, the $10,000 Wendi handed Katie at the dinner in March. Remember, Sigfredo and Luis were watching them eat dinner. The $5,000 deposit for Sigfredo once he arrived, and planning the July trip. Here's what Wendi and Sigfredo need to do at that moment. With Sigfredo present, Wendi needs to contact Donna and Harvey and put the phone on speaker. Wendi has to call Donna and Harvey to let them know she's in direct contact with the hitman because Katie kept the money from the March dinner. She then tells Donna to not alert Charlie about what Katie did. It's best to just act like everything is normal. Charlie doesn't know that Wendi and Katie have been communicating on WhatsApp, and he definitely doesn't know Wendi is in contact with Sigfredo. She also tells Donna she's rearranging the flow of communication to where she tells them what's going on, and from that, what she wants them to tell Charlie. This includes information Charlie is to convey to Katie. They also have to iron out any miscommunications or lies by Katie told to Sigfredo. Wendi can do this by messaging Katie on WhatsApp with Sigfredo present. She tells Katie a question to ask Sigfredo, then Katie calls Sigfredo, and when he answers, he puts it on speaker. Wendi and Sigfredo both hear what Katie says. Sigfredo tells Katie what to respond back to Wendi, then Katie would have to report back what Sigfredo said to Wendi on WhatsApp. And it'll be different than what they both heard her say. Immediately after that conversation, Wendi has to text Donna and Harvey to update them on what transpired with Sigfredo and Katie. Then she instructs them on how to update Charlie, but with only the details he's allowed to know. Then Donna calls Charlie. So it's 6 steps. Wendi calls Donna and Harvey's landline. Then Wendi messages Katie on WhatsApp to have her call Sigfredo. Then Katie calls Sigfredo. Then Katie reports back to Wendi. Wendi texts Donna and Harvey. Then Donna calls Charlie. It's 6 steps. 1. Wendi calls Donna and Harvey's landline. 2. Wendi messages Katie on WhatsApp to have her call Sigfredo. 3. Katie calls Sigfredo. 4. Katie reports back to Wendi on WhatsApp. 5. Wendi texts Donna and Harvey. 6. Donna calls Charlie. I'm basing all of what I just said on the call report. I'm going to adjust some of the columns so only important information is there. Right now up top you have the target phone number, target name, the date, the time, the call duration, the call direction, whether it's incoming or outgoing, the call type, whether it's voice call or text, the contact ID, which is the phone number, and then the contact name. I'm removing the target phone number. I'm also going to change the time from AM, PM to 24 hours. Almost all the calls and texts are outgoing, so if it's incoming, I'll switch the names around so all the names on the left are initiating contact with the names on the right. I'm also removing the contact ID phone number. So now it's going to be target name, the date, 24-hour time, the duration, the call type, so calls or texts, the contact name, and I'm also adding 2 additional columns. The first additional column is the time the call ends. That's simply done by adding the call duration to the time the call was initiated. Then the second additional column will be the amount of time between the call ending to the time the next call is initiated. Remember, Sigfredo and Wendi met between 9 and 10 a.m. that day on June 4th. Now let's go back over the call report from the top. Katie and Charlie are in the dark about what's going on. Katie calls Charlie at 12:21 a.m. and they speak for 40 minutes and 58 seconds. 33 seconds later at 1:03 a.m., Charlie calls Katie and the call lasts 10 seconds. Then 57 seconds after that, Charlie calls Katie and they speak for 36 minutes and 33 seconds. At 9:39 a.m., Wendi calls Donna and Harvey's landline. That call lasts 14 minutes and 36 seconds. After she hangs up, Wendi messages Katie on WhatsApp to have her call Sigfredo. It only took 1 minute and 30 seconds until Katie calls Sigfredo, and they only speak for 29 seconds. Within 1 minute and 25 seconds, Katie reports back to Wendi on WhatsApp. Wendi texts Donna and Harvey together at 9:57 a.m. 16 minutes after that, Donna calls Charlie at 10:13 a.m. It doesn't connect, but 6 minutes later, Charlie calls Donna back for a 1 minute and 38 second call. Then again 9 minutes later for a 2 minute and 10 second call. And 5 minutes later, Harvey calls Donna. What tells me that Wendi and Sigfredo were probably sitting in our minivan together comparing notes is the quick tandem between calls with no overlap. Wendi calls Harvey and Donna's landline and talks for 14 minutes and 36 seconds. That's enough time to update them on what's going on. Then 1 minute and 30 seconds after hanging up, Katie calls Sigfredo. That's enough time for Wendi to message Katie on WhatsApp to have her call Sigfredo. If it only took a minute and 30 seconds for Wendi to type a message, send it to Katie, Katie read it, then call Sigfredo, it only makes sense for the call between Katie and Sigfredo to only last 30 seconds. Then after they hang up, altogether it took 1 minute and 25 seconds for Katie to type a message to Wendi, send it, Wendi and Sigfredo read it, then Wendi texts Donna and Harvey for what Donna needs to tell Charlie. 16 minutes later, when Donna calls Charlie, they have a couple 1 to 2 minute conversations. Then Harvey calls Donna, most likely to see what she updated Charlie on, just in case Charlie calls Harvey. Harvey needs to be on the same page as Donna. Even though Donna, Harvey, and Charlie now know the updated plan for June 18th, they see Wendi taking it upon herself to meet with Sigfredo as a potential alibi problem for that day. They know Wendi better than anyone else. She met with Sigfredo in the morning. The murder is going to happen in the morning. She went rogue on June 4th. She'll go rogue on July 18th. Donna and Charlie have to think of a way to keep Wendi in her house on the morning hours of July 18th.